Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we have the new Flysky G11P transmitter and its 11 channel receiver. I've picked this particular RC to give you a rundown of how you'd set it up on your first connection to it or first put it in an RC. Mainly we've got the steering, the ESC, but this is running a Hobbywing 1080 G2 I believe it is in this one, and you have two auxiliary channels to control other functionality of the actual ESC, and it's just a good opportunity to run you through right from start to finish on how you'd connect it up to another RC and what you might want to configure, and it'll also give me a chance to show you how to set up extra buttons and dials to control auxiliary channels on ESCs or other things. But let's bring you in for a close-up look and see how we get on with this one. Right, so first thing we're going to want to do is start to configure our model. So if we go in, we go down to model, we go in here, select the model slot that you want. So for me, this is going to be first one, so I'll just choose model slot 1. Then we can name as model. So this is my TT01E carbon fibre, so we'll just name it TT01E gutted tick, and then you can press it and you'll see the name change on top of the screen. So then we can come out. So we have as receiver fitted, we've got our antenna wire out the way, then we've got a servo. So our servo wire with as negative to the outside, it does show you on the actual legend. So as servo, steering is going to go into as first slot, channel 1. Then we have our standard ESC connection. This is going to be as channel 2. Then we've got as 2 auxiliary channels, and these are just the sense wires. So you want them to the right hand side, to the far left hand side, and that's going to be channel 3 and 4. Then we can grab our BVD cable, and I've not stuck this receiver down just so I can show you, but this one goes into the far end where it says VCC BVD. Then all we're going to want to do is keep the negative folded back, put the positive into the positive on as balance cable, and then we just connect up our RC. So we can go in here and we can change it to no output, back out, go into as bind set, and for this we're going to go routine, 2-way, RX type standard. Make sure your output is set to PWM, and you can leave it on iBus or S-Bus depending on what you're using, but you definitely want it on PWM. I would leave this or set this to 333 Hz because that's as base sort of frequency that almost all ESCs and servos will run at. Then we want to go to our RC, press and hold as bind button. That'll turn it on. We can press start, and this will look for us receiver. So we've got a signal strength show up, we've got as RX voltage showing up, as TX voltage, so we can back out. Then you want to check to see what direction everything's working. So if we add throttle, it does go forward, brake, and then reverse. So that's working correctly. As steering on the other hand, that's going wrong direction. So if you need to switch any of these, we can go into as basic setup, we can go into reverse. As steering, we can go in and reverse it. And then when we back out, as steering's now going right direction, but we've got some adjustments to do on as endpoints because we don't want it oversteering either way. So what I would do first is down to sub trim, and then it's gonna be hard for me to show it, but basically we're gonna want to line up our steering to be as straight as possible. So at the moment it's slightly turned off one direction. So if we go into here, then we can just trim it. I'll do my best to get it straight. So once we have that straight, press it in to lock it in, then we can come out. Then we can go to our endpoints. So if I move the RC back, now we have a look to see where the steering goes to. So it's slightly oversteering. So we can come into this. You've got your left and right. So if we start left, we go into this, and then we need to back it down so it's not overstressing as servo. And you just want to look for you getting to full lock. Then we can go other direction, and you can see it's going too far. So we come across to right, and then we back it down till it relieves the strain on it. You do not want all your servo straining at full extent of travel, because all you're going to do is ultimately burn your servo out. I would always set your sub trim first, because then you know what travel you've got on either direction. The other plus point of setting the sub trim is, if we look on sub trim, we've got this set to right 27, but if we back out to as main screen, as steering trim is still 0. So when you change the steering trim now, you know that 0 is where your sub trim is perfectly straight. And then if you start having to put a little bit more on here to finally correct it, you can then look what you've got this set to. You can go back into your sub trim, you can put that setting in your sub trim, and then put this back to 0. So you're always at 0 on your actual trims. Just makes it a lot easier to see if you've had a bit of a crash and then you have to start adding trim. You know you bent something on your steering. Other thing I would do is run calibration on your ESC. Now that will depend completely on what ESC you have got. There are various ways of doing it. So most are press and hold the power button or press and hold the set button, but you will have to go through that on the actual ESC itself. And that's just so your ESC knows what full throttle and what full brake is. Not going to go into that on this because I've already covered it for that ESC. But other options we've got. So if we go into as transmitter, we've now got channels 3 and 4 that we need to assign. So we go into auxiliary, we go into channel 3. You can go in and you can actually name it. So you've got pre-installed, so we can look what it is: diffs, gearbox, cut gear, high beam, light, smoke, engine, ECAS, whistle. Not sure if they're tail light, low beam, lights, TK, shift. So you've got all these different tabs that are predefined. If you don't want any of them, you can go to custom. So if we go ESC auxiliary 1, so we know what it is, then we've got his name. Now we have to decide what controls it. So for this one, if you want it to be a button, so we can go in here, we can change it to a button, which is the K buttons, a switch, a trim, which are these, and then you've got your variables, which is this, and the one on the actual grip itself. So once you choose what type, then you can go in and you can choose either VR1 or VR2. I think the VR1 is this one at the top, so we can put that on VR2. So if we put this on VR2, then we move the one down there as thumb. We've got control of that channel. So that's got our control of channel 3. Then we can come out, we can go into channel 4, we can give it a name. So if we just go custom, so we call it ESC auxiliary 2. We can go in this, and again we can flip down, and I'm going to put it on VR1, which is the one at the top. So now we've got full control over this. And this would be a good one to go for the likes of a gyro, because you've got very fine control over it. You can go one notch at a time. So now we've got control of both them. And if we just press up on here, we can see what these are actually doing. And it is nice that this variable one is on notches as well. So you've got control over channel 3. So if you had channel 3 set to drag brake, for example, you can change the amount of drag brake really easily in real time. And then channel 4, if you've got that set to something else, you've got full control over that. So you can see what it's doing. And we can come off this, we can have main screen. So because we've got his BVD cable plugged into the positive on his balance lead, we get in the pack voltage. So we can see we're getting 7.58 volt from the actual pack. Our receiver is showing you your BEC voltage. So that's the voltage that the ESC is providing to your receiver and your servo. So we can see that. And it does hold pretty steady, this one. The 1080's got quite a good... It's got quite a good BEC, so you can see it's not really dropping, even though I'm holding that 9i mod 25 kilogram servo. So that's a good sign. You've got your transmitter voltage, so you can keep an eye on all these. On this, I'm just covering the basics to get you up and running. The main things that you're going to want to remember is your failsafe. If you set it to no output, if this loses connection with the RC, with this being an electric, it'll just stop, it'll just coast and stop. Your bind set, have it on routine, two-way so we get the telemetry back. Standard receiver type, because it's not an ESC receiver in one. You want this to be the PWM and iBus or PWM and S-bus, depending if you're going to run any iBus or S-bus sensors. But as long as it's PWM, it'll work with your ESC and your servo. Then moving down, have this set to other 333, because that is the stock hertz that almost every ESC and servo will run at least. There's one caveat that I found to that, and that is Traxxas, that for some reason you may have to lower this down to around 280, else the Traxxas ESCs, some of them won't calibrate, they're very slow. And then you just press your start to bind it, press and hold your bind button, power up. Next thing that I'd do, as soon as you've got that set up, basic setup, and check that your steering and your throttle are moving the right way. If they're not, you can come in here and just reverse them. Likewise with the auxiliary channels, if you want it to function the opposite way to what you changed dial, you can just reverse it. Then drop to your sub trim, correct your steering. Your throttle should always be at 0. Because you're going to run calibration on your ESC so it knows what 0 is. And then once you've done that, up to your endpoints, set your endpoints for your steering so your servo at full lock is not screaming at you and you're not going to burn your servo out. You don't have to touch anything on the throttle because you're running calibration on your speed controller. A lot of the other settings I'm going to cover in separate videos, but this is just to cover the basics, just to get you up and running. If you drop into the sensor panel, you can see what sensors you're getting. So your noise and everything from your actual signal, you can have that displayed. 100% signal quality because we sat on top of antenna. Your BVD voltage, 7.56 volt. RX voltage from your BEC to your receiver and servo, 6 volt. And then your transmitter, 7.7 volt on this one. There's a lot you can mess around with on here. You can change what sensors are showing where and what they're all up to. And on here you can come in and we can pop as BVD on. You can set an alarm for it and everything, but I'll cover this in more depth in videos specifically for those parts. But yeah, at least it gives you an idea of what you can do. If you want to view all your channels, I've just got this set, so you just press up. But yeah, that's pretty basic setup, and it covers all the things that you would need to know. Like always, your receiver, channel 1 is always your steering, channel 2 always your throttle. They're your stock settings. But yeah, that'll get you up and running. It'll get you bound to your favourite RC, and it does feel nice. The response is nice. Bearing in mind, this is not a really expensive servo. If you do want to stop the screen going off, because I usually have it set like this, but I've been messing around with this transmitter, you can go in, let's change that to 18650 because that's what I'm running off. Idle alarm, I turn it off. Auto off, I also disable. And then our delay, I have the backlight set so it's always on. Of course, 18650s, you got a ridiculous amount of battery life anyway. But yeah, so for me, your main takeaways are: bind it up, make sure it's set to PWM. Once it's bound up, run calibration on your ESC, make sure your wheels are turning right way when you're pulling throttle. Then jump to your steering, set your direction, so reverse the servo first if needed, then set your sub trim, then set your endpoints. Then you can go in and set your auxiliary channels to whatever function you need. If you need a switch, you can use any of the on-off switches. If you need a variable dial, you've got multiple ones of them you can choose. If you press up, you can see where your channels are at, just in case you've forgot. And if you press down, you can have your sensors all reading, and you can play around with what sensors you've got on here and where they are. But fascinating little transmitter, and as you can see, the response, even with around a £30 servo, they are good fast servos, but as you see, there's very low response time. So hopefully this will get you all set up and running. But let's wrap this one up. So there you have it, the FS G11P and the FS R11P receiver with the BVD cable, how to set up auxiliary channels, and just a basic run through of what you want to set in what order to get your steering right. And just remember, you do need to calibrate your ESC when you change your radio, just so it knows where full throttle, mid and full brake is. But that'll all be dependent on what speed controller you've got. But it's definitely good practice to get into. It's quite a nice sized little receiver. Fits just on the side of this, at side of ESC. So yeah, if it fits in this, it'll fit in most things. Nice that you've got the antenna on it as well. Especially with being 11 channel, if you want to put it in a rock crawler. I know people like driving rock crawlers underwater, but you really need your antenna to be above the water line, so with this you could do that. But yeah, it's nice, very quick response, and the steering feels great, works really well with these 9i mod servos. So hopefully that'll help you guys get your new transmitter fitted to your RC, all bound up and the basic settings covered. And if you've got a few auxiliary channels, we've covered how to set them. But thanks a lot for watching Wtf Rc Cars. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.